Now, real quick, if you clicked on this video, there's a very good chance you're just here for the information, which will start right about there. So go ahead and fast forward to that. If you're not interested in this conversation, it's okay. Now, for the 6 of you that are going to stick around. Now, I had intended on this video having sort of a Pac-Man kind of vibe with the on-screen titles, but I think it turned out more like Super Fast Matt, so I probably owe him an apology. But go check his stuff out. He's got some really cool stuff over there. So about 6 months ago, I decided I was gonna body drop the stupid truck, and at some point, I stopped dragging my feet, committed to the project, started cutting. Now, if you're one of the 6 people that saw those videos, thank you very much for giving me some of your time. It is greatly appreciated. And if you're one of the people that gave me a thumbs up or left an encouraging comment, you are my favorite people. For the rest of you, those 3 videos are the first 3 videos on my playlist, #StupidTruck. Now, I'm not the right person to do a video like this, but I can't seem to find anything out there on YouTube that's similar, so I figured I'd share what I learned over the course of doing the body drop on the stupid truck. Now, some of this information will be first generation S10 specific, but in the reality of the world, most of the information in this video will apply to almost any truck that you want to body drop. So in the process of trying to make the decision if I wanted to body drop this truck, which I knew I wanted to, but is it something I could do? I went to Google and I went to YouTube, and it turns out Google don't like me. Not to mention that apparently YouTube algorithm doesn't care for me much either. So I couldn't find nearly enough information. I saw tons of videos of people that body drop their truck. I saw short clips of people showing off their body drop. I even saw some that were in progress, but I never saw a how-to or anything similar to that. Zip Tie did a Z-frame on his Toyota, but he replaced the whole floor, which sort of made it irrelevant to what we were doing. Now, Rody did a body drop on his D21, but again, he used a different method of dropping than we were after. But it's worth checking out because he did an excellent job of explaining the different types of body drops and how to go about doing them. But when it comes down to it, there wasn't a, hey, this is how you do it kind of video. And don't get me wrong, my videos are not that either. My videos are more along the lines of this is what I did. And it may be right, it may be wrong. We'll find out later in life. But now that it's done, the algorithm's just popping up with all kind of how-to videos. So we know there wasn't a lot of information out there when I started this project. But the moment that the first video was released on the body drop, suddenly everyone was offering me input of, you need to do this, I would have done that, you should have done this. The problem is, by the time that video is released, it's been done. And it's too late for that information to be used in a lot of cases. Other cases, it was not. So the purpose behind this video is to take the information that everybody else gave me after I had made my mistakes and the information that I learned what I should have done, could have done, would have done, and give you a more informed input on how to. I'm not telling you how to because how you do it is up to you. But I want you to be more informed in the event that you decide to do a similar type of project. So all the information that was given to me, everything I learned, everything that I would have done if I had to do it all over again. Hopefully one day I'll get the opportunity to do this same type of thing on another vehicle, and I'll be more informed because of all the info that other people gave me, as well as the fact that I've already done it once. So I have more information now. Now, I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible, but we know how that usually works out. And I do want you to have all the information, so We'll see what we can do. Now, the first thing you need to know is that a body drop is extremely time consuming. You need to plan on it taking twice as long as you intend. Now, in my case, the wife and I own 3 different businesses, and they are very small, meaning we are the only employees. So I only get a couple hours at a time to work on it, and a large part of that couple of hours is spent staring at it, trying to make sure that I'm not about to screw up with my next cut. Plan on it taking longer than you ever would think. Create a budget and then double it, maybe even triple it, because you're going to use a lot more cutoff wheels, grinding wheels, flap discs, and most importantly, a ton more welding wire than you ever would think, because you're going to walk into this going, it's not going to require a lot of materials because we're just going to cut this and put 2 inches of metal there, or 3 inches of metal, or however far you're going to body drop it. And then when it's all said and done, your material list is going to grow and grow and grow because you were unprepared for it. So walk into it prepared about the cost. Now, my wife will tell you I am by no means a clean freak, but I should have cleaned this cab out, ground down all this rust, and got rid of it and vacuumed it out. My shop vac was broke. Hopefully Santa will get me a new one. But if you'll clean the cab up on the inside of the floor before you start cutting and grinding and welding, and then vacuum it out on a regular basis, I promise you it will help you tremendously, because it'll make it easier to do your welding. All right, so the next thing you're going to want to do is add some square tubing or some heavy gauge round pipe to your budget, unless you have a lot of scrap metal laying around. Now, my body drop's already been done, so I'm just going to illustrate it using a piece of angle iron, which you can use. Matter of fact, even if you just use a 2x4 with some flat stock bolted to the end of it, you're gonna wanna do this. So what you're gonna wanna do is take your square pipe or round tubing or whatever, and come in at the bottom of the cab on one side, run it at an angle, and weld it to the other side at a higher point. Then you wanna come from Then you want to come from the bottom over here and come up to that one. You want to do the same thing at the back. Weld something in, connect that point to a higher point over here, and a lower point here to a higher point over there. Do that front and back, and you might even want to go from the back to the front in some places. Now keep in mind that all of your weld points need to be higher than as far as your body drop goes. So if your floor is going to come up 3 inches, you have to weld those up over 3 inches higher. Otherwise, the floor can't drop, your cab can't drop around the floor. Now, as far as I know, I was very lucky with this, because we all know that if you saw the videos, I didn't do this. But what that'll do is it'll keep your cab from getting skewed and warped and what have you while you're dropping it down. And let's face it, we won't know whether mine's right until later on down the road, when everything goes together and stuff don't start bolting up properly. Now, if your truck is bagged, you might want to cut that pinch weld off down there and then weld you in some steel plate. That doesn't apply to this truck because, well, it's a static drop. But if you're gonna cut the pinch weld out and put some steel plate in so that you could drag the truck, you definitely want to cut that out at this point. But you want to wait to put the steel plate in until after the body drop is finished. So right about now would be a good time to figure out what you're going to do with that blower motor on the front of the firewall. You going to keep your AC? Do you even have AC? Do you want a heater when it's all said and done? All this has to be taken into consideration, because that blower motor, for now, at least needs to be removed, but you need to figure out what you're going to do after you put it back on, because it might not fit going back on like it does right now. So shortly after I posted the part 1 video, Zip Tie chimes in and says, "Hey, why didn't you just do this?" Well, I didn't think of that. But I promise you, if I ever do another body drop, I will be doing this. So I figure I need to explain this to you before you get to the point of, well, I didn't think of that. So I went ahead and pulled the cab off the frame so that I could better illustrate this to you, because it would be a lot easier than just telling you. You remember in part 1 when the cab was sitting on the frame, which was on the suspension, and then I cut the floor out, which released all that weight off the frame and allowed the suspension to push the frame up? This fixes that problem. Now my body drop's done, so there's no reason to weld these in, but the concept's still the same. I've got some floor jacks up underneath, just holding these pieces of angle iron up so that you get the concept of what I'm talking about. So your body mounts are here and here, which means that this piece of angle iron and this piece of angle iron are between the body mounts. Now, if you come in, weld this piece of angle to your frame temporarily, do it more than a tack weld, it's a 400-pound cab, do the same here and on the other side as well. At that point, when you cut the floor out of the cab can drop down and rest on these pieces of angle. You might want to use square tubing or at least a heavy gauge angle iron. It doesn't matter if you have your frame on jack stands or if it's on the suspension at that point. Then when you get done with the body drop, or at least get the cab put back together, you can cut these back off the frame. It's all good. Now that's also the reason that if you're going to remove your pinch weld, you want to do it before you get to this point. Otherwise, the cab will sit on the pinch weld, and then when you remove the pinch weld, it's not the lowest point of the vehicle anymore. Of course, now if your truck is bagged, none of this matters. Just lay the frame out, drop the cab. Boom, done. Now, if you saw the S10 Facts video, a collaboration with Hardcore Garage, then you probably already have this information. But just in case you got the attention span of a 5-year-old and went ahead and flipped it over to Blippy before you got to the end of the video, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this anyway. If you want to use a chain hoist to lift the cab of a first gen S10, the balance point is about 4 to 5 inches behind the top window line on the cab. Now understand, this is a completely stripped S10 cab. No seats, no dash, no interior of any type. Now, if your plan is to call up a friend, get him to come over and help you move the cab off the frame, you keep in mind that in the last video, we found out that that cab on that truck weighs about 350 pounds or more. So you might want to call multiple friends. And if you don't have multiple friends, this would be a good time to go out and get some. But be particular. You're looking for a specific criteria on the friends list. You want friends that A, big muscles, B, not a lot of brain except for mechanical knowledge, and it is an added benefit if they have a car hauler, a car lift, maybe a tow truck. I don't know. These are all things to consider. Otherwise, you probably need to run down to Harbor Freight and get you a chain hoist. Be mindful of where your cut lines are and make accurate cuts. And keep in mind that these body mounts, they come all the way up to the underside of the body. You don't want to cut straight through your bolt hole location, so you need to pick your cut line properly. Make sure you cut it straight. If you're going to do an engine swap like I did, and there might be clearance issues in reference to the pinch weld, take care of that before you start your body drop. Draw your cut line smooth and accurately and then measure however far you're going to do your body drop and draw your other line. If I had to do this all over again, I would have made sure that my lines were 1.5 inches apart from one side to the other, regardless as to whether one piece of metal was further back or forward from the other. That way I could weld those pieces of metal together without adding additional metal in those areas. In my case, I had to pull the pinch weld out, therefore this had to go in. But the areas over here in the wheel wells, they could have just been welded straight together. But I didn't know any better. Now you do. All right, so now that we've covered the firewall, let's talk about the back of the cab. If you're not a professional welder, this might apply to you. Now I said might apply because if you're looking for best of show at every car show you go to, it does not apply to you. But at the same time, let's be honest, if you're looking for best of show, you need to get a professional to do it anyway. And if you're not a professional, fork out some money. So when I did this, you see the cut lines on the ends of the cab, they're coming straight up, which is all happy, fine, good, because that allows the cab to slide down that edge as it drops. And then you can just weld that up, or in my case, because my cuts were not accurate, I had to put a small strip of metal on the inside so that I had a thicker piece of metal to weld up. What's important is this cut line right here. When it's all said and done, you want to make that cut line 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch less than the overall drop length. In other words, if in my case I'm going to drop it 1.5 inches, I should have done that gap 1 inch apart. That would allow me to overlap those two pieces of metal and weld it up. And that is a lot easier because when you lay two pieces of metal on top of each other, you have a thicker area of metal to work with and you don't blow through the metal. In my case, I ended up having to put some metal on the back side, at which point it defeated the purpose of cutting and butt welding. Keep in mind your seatbelt location. We've got a spot right here where the seatbelt came from, and for most people needs to go back in. Therefore, this spot where the seatbelt goes needs to be here so that it can bolt back in. That's the bolt point for the seatbelt. In my case, that doesn't apply because the seatbelt will be integrated into the bucket seats. Well, unless I can think of anything else, and that probably ain't going to happen tonight, I've only got one more thing for you. And I probably should have done it at the beginning of the video. Anyway. So at the beginning of my part 1 video, the very first cut I made was right here at the bumper mounts. And to be honest with you, that was the last cut I should have made. I should have waited to make those cuts. And the reason being, you can always shim or trim the body mounts in order to get your cab where you want it to be. But simply put, if you'll wait till you get done with the cab, bolt your fenders on, you'll find out exactly how far off you are and whether or not you need that full amount or more of that amount of drop when you cut those off and weld them back together. So would I do it again? Absolutely. But I'd probably watch this video first. Holy crap, that's 2 videos in a row with no music. You guys must be awesomely bored.